Hello, today we're talking about Republican Rome, subtitled the Xerox Empire, because as we'll talk about in a minute, they just copied whatever the Greeks did. We're going to talk about a couple of different big ideas that were key to being a Roman, and we're going to take a look at the ways in which some of those ideas might appear obviously or in a subtle fashion in the play Brothers, which you're going to read from the Roman drama section. So when we talk about Republican Rome, we're dealing with an extremely long period of time here, 509 to 27 BCE, so a little under 500 years. And that doesn't even include the Roman Empire. So during this 500 or so year period that we're dealing with here, Rome was its own version of a democracy in the similar way that Greece was a democracy. We'll talk about the way in which the government worked, but it's in a ridiculously long amount of time. And as we know from this, my little subtitle of the Xerox Empire, one of the big Roman ideas is, hey, if the Greeks did it, so will we. And they essentially had contact with Greek culture in the 200s BC during the First Punic War. And that was really the thing that got a lot of the Greek cultural influence rolling into Rome. And some of this Greek influence we already know about, right? So the Greeks have Zeus, and the Romans take Zeus and all the other gods in the pantheon and just give them new names, right? So Zeus becomes Jupiter, and you can go down the line of every single Greek deity, and they get a new Roman name. The Romans didn't really change that much else. And that kind of example is a good sort of metaphor for the way in which Romans used Greek culture, although there are some other important modifiers. One of the important things about the Greeks, or rather about the Romans, is they didn't just do what the Greeks did, they added to it. They made it bigger. They made it more spectacular, more entertaining, more violent, more exciting, and generally speaking, less thoughtful and less philosophical. There are plenty of really important works of Roman philosophy, but the Greeks were the more introspective, thoughtful society. The Romans were much more practical, and that'll be a theme we'll kind of weave through the conversation today. One of the reasons the Romans had to be so damn practical is because they had a ridiculous amount of territory to cover. Athens, even at its height, only controlled small parts of the Greek peninsula, whereas Rome, at its height, even just in the Republic, controlled all of the territory you see colored here. And if you look, the breakdown is basically anything to the death of Caesar, includes the stuff in yellow, but you also want to include the purple and the pink. So consider how long, for example, it might have taken to travel from one side of this territory to the other. The Romans militarily conquered and bureaucratically ruled all of this territory. So say you are the governor of Cairo and you have a report that there's a rebellion or some new piece of information going on. You need to get that to Rome. How long is it going to take for you to get that information on a boat and get it all the way to Rome? Keep in mind that sailing in this day is a really risky activity. Ships just sink out of the blue, etc. We're talking about a couple of weeks sailing maybe, with a low percentage of, or medium percentage of how likely it would be that your information would even get through. And say you're not sailing, say you're going overland and you're in northern France and you need to let the people in Rome know what's going on in your little kingdom or territory of northern France. You're traveling over land, which is another extremely slow and extremely dangerous way to travel. This is a staggering amount of territory to be covered for this era, and a lot of what Rome did culturally was in support of finding a way to control, manage, subdue, but also distract the people living in these territories. And that'll be, like I said, a recurring theme of our conversation today. So how do we hold it? Patriotism, the wonderfulness of what it is to be Roman, and the different cultural ways in which Rome told their people, and I mean their people, I mean Italians, but also everyone they conquered, how wonderful it was to be Roman. We'll talk about religion as a huge mechanism of control, and that's an idea we're sort of familiar with, but as compared to the Greek religion, the Romans were much more sort of propaganda-oriented with their religious rites and ceremonies. Family was a huge cultural value in Rome, and that cultural value was communicated to everyone else in the territories that Rome had conquered, and then entertainment, and obviously that's a big deal with Rome. One of the big kind of ideas I want to get here is, if you look at the size of that territory, you can't just conquer and oppress the peoples in that territory everywhere, right, and maintain it for that long. The Roman Empire eventually did fall, but it took, right, nearly 1,000 years from beginning to end, where Rome ruled much of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. So how do you do that? And one of the ways that they did that was not just to come into a village and say, all right, we're going to destroy your gods and kill all your governors and kill everybody ruling your little village here in wherever, France, Germany, wherever. But we're going to come in, we're going to defeat your army, and instead of killing everybody and oppressing you, we're going to teach you how to be Roman. And we're going to show you how great it is to be Roman. We're the Romans. We've got roads, we've got technology, we've got government. We can protect you from that next tribe over the hill who keeps coming over the hill and killing all your people. So it's really a sales job in a lot of different ways. And a lot of the ideologies that Romans would sell their territorial people who they're conquering are on this list right here, right? Religion is more about in Rome internally, but the notions of patriotism, family, and entertainment are big, big deals in terms of how you conquer a peoples and get them, like, how do you conquer a people and get them not to rise up against you all the time? Again, they eventually did. We'll talk about that later, but for a long time, they didn't. If you're going to do something overall, said the Romans, if you're going to do something, do it big. And this is another important concept that'll be something we weave through the entire conversation. So when we talk about Rome, we're talking about a really complex nation, both in Italy itself. And you see, and you don't need to worry about the details of all of these different colors, but I just pulled this map up because it shows the number of different individual cities just in Italy alone. And we tend to think of the notion of a country, right? We tend to think of Italy as a country. Well, today, Italy is a country. Back in this era, and actually for most of Theater 317, the notion of a country, the notion of a nationality is a very fluid and flexible thing, right? You identify yourself in this era more with a region or even just a city than you do with a larger country or nationality. So not only does Rome have to manage and juggle all these internal Italian political things, but they also have a remarkable diverse population. If you, again, go back and take a look at that map, the different races, the different geographical conditions and climates, the different religions that are covered by that enormous amount of Roman territory. This is a tapestry depicting African pygmies, which the notion of an African pygmy is really problematic and has some racial baggage to it, but it does nonetheless, this tapestry depicts the idea that Rome was aware of the cultural diversity of the different lands and geographies that it had conquered. So it can be a really interesting and difficult thing to sort of create a Roman identity out of massive amounts of territory and to create a Roman identity out of all these different people from different places with different traditions and different skin colors and everything. One of the things Rome does, just like the Greeks, is to create this democratic republic. And by 200 BC, right, and just as a side note, we're talking about BC and BCE. They basically mean the same thing. The old version is before Christ and after Christ, and the new version, historians now are referring to it as the Common Era. So BCE is before Common Era. It means exactly the same thing as before Christ. Look at the size of this republic. 300,000 or more voting citizens. Now, obviously, not surprisingly, in order to be a voting citizen, you need to be a Roman male, typically a landowner, not always, but you have to be an adult male. And there are occasions, just like the metics with Greece, there are occasions when foreigners will be admitted to voting in Rome. But 300,000 people is a lot. Now, mainly only those people who are in Rome are able to attend the assembly and vote. But still, there is an ethos, an idea to Rome that says, hey, look, if you're a Roman citizen, no matter where you live, your vote counts. In reality, that doesn't tend to be actually true. Again, imagine being a Roman citizen living in central France, helping to administer and manage a conquered territory. You want to vote? You don't have to travel from central France all the way to Rome. That's going to take, say, a month, and then vote, and then go back to your territory another month. It's possible, but it's not likely. Nonetheless, a lot of people, a very diverse nation that's trying to sort of respect and engage all of the different kinds of people who are living there. One of the ways that the Romans did this, and here, right, I have found a nice little diagram of the Constitution of the Roman Republic, which echoes the complexity of that structure of Greek government image that I showed you a couple slideshows ago. So the Romans did bureaucracy. even better than the Greeks did because they had so much more territory. And again, don't worry about the specific mechanics of this diagram I'm showing you here, but the notions of order, efficiency, discipline, the way things get done is a huge deal here. And they created this ridiculous, amazing infrastructure, both a physical infrastructure, right? The Romans created roads everywhere, all over that territory, as in like brick by brick cobblestone type roads that are laid by hand, stretching hundreds and hundreds and thousands of miles. And think about the supply, logistics, the military protection, all the bureaucracy it takes just to build those roads everywhere. That's one tiny example of the enormous ability of the Roman Republic to create order and efficiency out of chaos. And discipline was a key cultural trait to figure out how to do that. Another key cultural trait, not surprisingly, is the notion of military prowess. Here on the left, we have an 18th century visualization of a historical description of the way the Roman army would have organized itself when attacking or engaging a foe. And you don't need to worry about the details of it, but you see in this diagram the extreme thought and organization that goes into conquering a people. So we take that bureaucratic organizational notion of Roman culture and apply it to the army. This is another way in which Rome was able to hold so much territory. Their armies were super organized, had the best technology, and as you see on the right, were trained in numerous different forms of combat and different weapons. And so being a military individual, especially as a Roman male, is a really big deal. The Republic was basically, again, if you look at that map and that territory, the only way to hold that territory is you're going to be at war somewhere all the time, because some people are always going to need conquering or reconquering. And so being as a Roman male, being an athletic, disciplined, powerful, physically powerful, but also smart individual was a big part of what it was to be Rome. And then we have to have a deep and solid veneration of what came before. And the Romans actively pursued a number of different ways in which Roman lineage was respected and revered. The power and the force of tradition is a really big deal in what it means to be Roman. So on the left there, you see an ancestor shrine. And we talked about this when we talked about ancient Greece, right? When your dad dies, you bury him in the backyard, and in your house, you set this little sacred fire, and you have a little figurine that is the sort of supernatural embodiment of your father's spirit, and you worship that. And so here's a collection of little figurines from ancient Rome that are, these are literally little idols that you would have in your house, and they're memories of your father. So there's a huge appreciation for the people who came before you. On the right, this is a 1538 manuscript, so much, much later, of Titus Livius, or also known as Livy. He wrote a number of different extremely lengthy historical documents about the history of Rome. So there's a supernatural veneration of the past, respect your parents even after they've died, but there's also a scientific, historical, written veneration of the past. We are Rome. We want to know who we are, so we write down our history and we know and remember and venerate where we came from. And that's a really big deal as well. That's a huge cultural statement to say history is important and everyone should at least be aware that the history is out there, and frequently in school, right, to know it, to recite it, to memorize it in a handful of different ways. So the Romans are definitely interested in finding a way to respect the past. And so when we add up those things, we talk about patriotism and how you should behave as a Roman in terms of supporting the Republic. The idea of bureaucracy and organization, you need to be a good soldier who follows orders but is physically powerful and smart, and you need to know where you came from as an individual. You need to execute some degree of veneration and worshipful respectfulness of what came before. What we get here then with these three things, and we'll talk about it in the second half of the slideshow, is that Rome is then fundamentally a practical society more than a philosophical society. The bottom line in Rome is, does it work? Can you get it done? Does it maintain the territory we've conquered? And does it support Rome? As we noted during Greece, for example, there were plenty of very practical and patriotic things in ancient Greece, but there were also things like, say, Euripides, who was much more philosophical. He was much more introspective. He criticized the society. He was kind of an outsider. And the Greeks didn't love Euripides, but they tolerated him. Euripides would not have made it in Republican Rome because what he has to offer is not practical. It's philosophical, it's introspective, it's sort of thoughtful. The Romans were not exactly heavily thoughtful. So, as you read Brothers, talk about the ways in which this play promotes a veneration of the past through respect for elders, how it promotes utter loyalty to the way it is to be Roman. And then, is this a philosophical play, or is it more like practical? Like, well, let's just do the things that work and we'll figure it out and we'll move forward. And find me some examples from the play where you see somebody being introspective and ideological versus somebody being practical in the way that we need to just figure out how to make it work and move forward.